You're listening to the Valley Current.
You know, when you slide behind the wheel of your car, there's this immediate expectation of precision, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, you look down at the dashboard and you just trust it implicitly. I mean, the speedometer tells you exactly how fast you're going. The fuel gauge tells you exactly how much gas is in the tank.
Right.
The engine temperature gauge sits right there in the middle telling you, everything is fine. You don't guess.
No, you don't form a committee to figure it out.
Exactly. You don't convene a committee meeting to debate how fast the car might be moving based on the wind resistance. You just read the dial. It's a very comforting, binary, visible reality.
Yeah, it is.
But then you step out of your car, you take the elevator up to the executive boardroom of, any major corporation really, and suddenly that pristine dashboard is just broken.
Completely shattered.
We look at the diagnostic landscape of business forecasting, budgets, timelines, project completions, and we are basically flying blind. We pretend we have a speedometer when all we really have is a painted on number. And the cost of that illusion is staggering for you, the listener, whether you realize it or not. So, okay, let's unpack this. That is what we are diving into today using a really brilliant piece of source material.
It's a fascinating document.
It really is. It's the April 2026 C-Suite Leadership Bulletin, published by Computer Law Group and authored by their managing partner, Jack Russo.
Right.
And the entire focus of this bulletin is on Stanford professor Sam Savage, his groundbreaking book called The Flaw of Averages, and a frankly revolutionary piece of software he developed called the Chanceometer.
So our mission here for this deep dive is to really uncover why our standard, universally accepted way of forecasting is structurally broken, at a fundamental mathematical level.
Right, the actual math is flawed.
Exactly. And we're going to examine how replacing single number guesses with probability distributions, which is something Sam Savage refers to as the chance economy, how that can radically and permanently change how you make decisions.
Whether you're running a Fortune 500 company or, just planning the trajectory of your own life.
Yeah, exactly.
But before we can look at the cure that Savage has built, we have to accurately diagnose the disease.
Which is everywhere.
It's everywhere. And according to the bulletin, that disease is the flaw of averages. The author starts with an incredibly vivid, almost absurd foundational anecdote, and I love this so much. Picture a statistician standing in a room.
Okay.
This person has one foot fully submerged in a bucket of freezing ice water.
Ouch.
Right. And their other foot is standing directly in a blazing fire.
That sounds terrible.
It's a bad day. But you ask the statistician, hey, how's the temperature? They look down at their clipboard, they calculate the mean between the freezing water and the burning fire, and they report that on average, the temperature is comfortable.
It's such a brilliant image because, it exposes the absolute absurdity of what happens every single day in corporate planning.
Yeah.
The statistician is in absolute physical agony, right? Suffering from frostbite and severe burns simultaneously.
Right, but the math,
The calculated average, says everything is perfectly fine.
Wow.
And the bulletin lays out the underlying mathematical truth governing this, which is a rule that every leader essentially needs to memorize.
Okay, lay on me.
It states that plans based on average assumptions are always wrong because, and this is key, the average of a nonlinear function is never the function of the average.
Okay, we need to put the brakes on right there and really digest that phrase. The average of a nonlinear function is never the function of the average.
Oh, it's a mouthful.
It sounds like the kind of equation that gets written on a chalkboard in a graduate level applied mathematics class, leaving everyone in the room completely lost.
Totally.
For you, the listener, who is sitting in a budget meeting right now or trying to forecast your department's quarterly output, what does that actually mean in plain English? What makes the function nonlinear?
So think about the relationship between time and money in a product launch.
Okay.
A project manager comes into the boardroom and says, well, based on our historical data, it will take us 6 weeks to launch this new software.
Pretty standard.
Very standard. 6 weeks is an average. It's a single static number. But reality, the actual real-world consequence of that timeline, is nonlinear.
Meaning what exactly?
By that, I mean the rewards and the penalties do not scale evenly. They aren't symmetrical.
Ah, okay.
If the project finishes 1 week early, what happens? You might save a little bit of money on contractor overhead, maybe a few $1,000s.
Which is nice, but not earth-shattering.
Right. But if the project finishes 1 week late, the impact isn't just losing a few $1,000s in the other direction.
Right, it's way worse.
Exactly. A 1-week delay might mean you miss a crucial holiday market window. It might trigger massive contractual penalty clauses with your distribution partners.
Oh, wow.
It might allow a competitor to launch their product first, which could cost you millions of dollars in market share.
So the upside and downside are totally unbalanced.
Completely. A little bit early is slightly good, but a little bit late is catastrophically bad. That is a non-linear outcome.
Got it.
So by handing the C-suite a single average number of 6 weeks, the project manager is actually hiding all of that massive existential risk out on the extreme edges.
The edges of the bell curve, basically.
Yes, what statisticians call the tails of the probability distribution.
I'm thinking about a completely different scenario that kind of illustrates this idea of averages hiding reality.
Let's hear it.
Imagine you're tasked with buying shoes for your entire extended family for a huge family reunion.
Sounds like a nightmare already.
Oh, totally. And you decide to be hyper-efficient about it. So you measure the foot of your 3-year-old toddler, your teenage nephew, your spouse, and your grandfather.
Yeah.
You add up all the sizes, you divide by the number of people, and you determine that the average shoe size for your family is a size 8.
Mathematically sound.
Exactly. So you go to the store and you buy everyone a pair of size 8 sneakers. The math is flawless, the average is perfectly calculated. But when you hand those shoes out, your toddler is tripping over them, and your grandfather can't even squeeze his toes in. Nobody's shoes actually fit. The average is mathematically correct, but practically it's entirely useless.
And the scary thing is, businesses everywhere are walking around in the wrong size shoes.
Right.
Every single budget you build, every timeline you approve, every sales forecast you present to the board, none of those are actual solid numbers.
They're estimates.
They're alive.
Okay.
They all live inside a wider distribution of possibilities, stretching from a best-case scenario to a worst-case disaster.
Yeah.
But corporate culture demands a single number on a PowerPoint slide, so we force that living, breathing distribution of possibilities into a straitjacket.
We force it to be a size 8.
We force it to be a size 8, exactly.
But wait, I do have to challenge the premise just a bit here. I mean, averages aren't entirely useless, right?
Definitely not.
Like, if I'm a teacher grading a final exam, the class average tells me something highly valuable about how well the material was absorbed overall. Or if I'm looking at smoothing out my company's past sales data over the last decade to see if we're generally growing or shrinking, a moving average helps me see the trend line through the noise.
That's true.
So why is predicting a budget or a timeline so fundamentally different that we have to just, throw the concept of the average out the window entirely?
It's a great question. And the distinction comes down entirely to time orientation and the collapse of uncertainty.
The collapse of uncertainty.
Yeah. Averages work brilliantly for describing static history.
Because it already happened.
Exactly. If you're measuring what has already happened, like past sales or completed test scores, all the uncertainty of those events has collapsed into a fixed reality. You're just summarizing established facts.
Right, you're not guessing anymore.
But forecasting a budget or a timeline is an attempt to map a probabilistic reality. You're mapping the future.
And the future hasn't happened yet.
Exactly. It's composed entirely of interacting variables, risks, and random chances. To use an average to predict the future is to essentially pretend that uncertainty doesn't exist.
Wow.
Yeah. The bulletin actually highlights a fantastic quote from Sam Savage that summarizes this perfectly. He says, "There is a reason business has instruments for everything except uncertainty."
That's such a striking line. I mean, we have speedometers, altimeters, thermometers.
Yeah.
Every physical variable that matters to navigation has an instrument with a dial, right?
Right.
A range, a needle that sweeps back and forth to show you the current state of flux. But when a CEO asks, hey, will we hit our revenue target? There is no dial.
No dial at all.
There's just a bold font number sitting statically on a page.
And that's because the instrument is failing the operator.
Yeah.
The bold makes it very clear that when that single number on the PowerPoint slide turns out to be wrong, and historically it almost always is, it's usually not because the analyst made a mistake or lacked talent.
Right.
It's because the instrument being used, that point estimate, is fundamentally the wrong tool for measuring a world governed by chance.
It's like using the wrong wrench.
Worse, it's like you're trying to weigh a bowling ball with a yardstick. The tool literally cannot measure the property you are actually dealing with.
Man, we're using yardsticks to weigh bowling balls, and we're buying size 8 shoes for toddlers.
We really are.
The SNATIC single-point average is structurally broken when it comes to measuring the future. So let's look at the missing instrument. Let's really dig into the chanceometer.
Let's do it. So the chanceometer is Savage's cure to the disease of the single-point estimate.
Okay.
It's a software tool developed by his company, Corp. And what it does is it takes any standard static forecast, those single numbers sitting in a spreadsheet, and it converts them into a dynamic probability distribution.
And visually, what does that look like?
Visually, it's expressed as a literal dial on a dashboard. It's a gauge running from 0% to 100% certainty.
Okay, so let's apply this to our project manager from earlier, the one who promised the product launch in 6 weeks, based on an average.
Yeah, the one making a terrible mistake.
Right. How does the chanceometer physically change that conversation in the room?
Well, under the old static model, the project manager looks at the data, calculates the mean, and says, it will take 6 weeks.
And it sounds very authoritative.
It feels incredibly authoritative. But when you run that exact same data with the exact same input through the chanceometer, the software processes the underlying variables and the dial spins.
Okay.
Instead of giving you a date, it gives you a probability. It might tell you, this project has a 6% chance of completing in 6 weeks.
A 6% chance?
Yeah.
Oh my God. You walk into that room feeling 100% confident, ready to bet your job on it, and the software reveals you have essentially no shot at hitting that deadline.
Almost zero.
I am struck by a quote from Savage in the bulletin regarding this exact scenario. He says, "The difference isn't the math. The difference is honesty about what you actually know."
And that's the painful part for a lot of leaders. It forces honesty into an environment that typically rewards false confidence.
Right, bravado.
Yeah, exactly. But to understand why that 6% number is so much more accurate than the 6-week promise, we really need to look under the hood of the chanceometer.
Let's pop the hood.
The engine powering this honesty is something called Monte Carlo simulation.
Okay, I hear the term Monte Carlo thrown around in finance and engineering discussions quite a bit.
It's very common there.
But I want to make sure we truly understand the nuts and bolts of it. The bulletin notes this method was actually developed at Los Alamos during the Manhattan Project, right?
Yes. The history here is deeply intertwined with the limits of human calculation.
Tell me more.
So back in the 1940s, scientists like Stanislaw Ulam and John von Neumann were trying to solve incredibly complex problems regarding neutron diffusion in nuclear weapons.
Just casual, light math.
Very casual.
Yeah.
They needed to know how far neutrons would travel through different materials before colliding with atomic nuclei. And the physics involves so many random variables and interacting probabilities that the math was simply too complicated to solve with a single, elegant equation. You couldn't just calculate an average distance.
Right, because the materials are complex, the angles of collision are totally random, and it's a chain reaction.
Exactly. So the story goes, Ulam was allegedly recovering from an illness, spending his days playing a lot of solitaire.
As you do.
As you do when you're resting. And he started wondering what the statistical probability was of winning a game of Canfield solitaire.
Okay, interesting pivot from atomic bombs.
Right. He realized that trying to calculate every possible permutation of a shuffled deck mathematically was practically impossible. The variables were too vast.
Too many combinations.
But there was another way. He could simply deal the cards, play 100 games, record the outcomes, and see how many times he won.
Oh, I see.
If he won 15 times out of 100, his probability of winning was roughly 15%.
Just brute forcing it.
Yes. He and von Neumann realized they could apply this exact brute force simulation method to the atomic bomb problem using the newly invented ENIAC computer. And that is the essence of Monte Carlo simulation.
So instead of trying to write one perfect equation to predict the one true outcome, you just simulate the event thousands of times and look at the spread of the results.
Precisely.
It's a bit like the character Dr. Strange in the Avengers movies, looking at 14 million alternate futures to see exactly how many times they managed to defeat Thanos.
That is actually a perfect analogy, yes. Yeah. Where a traditional business plan uses a single best estimate for each input variable. For instance, assuming building materials will arrive exactly on day 4 and the weather will be perfectly clear on day 10, Monte Carlo simulation recognizes reality.
It accepts the messiness.
It knows that materials might arrive anywhere between day 2 and day 12, depending on trucking logistics. It knows the weather has a historical probability of being bad 20% of the time in that region. So the chanceometer draws random samples, from the probability distribution of each individual variable, and it calculates the entire project outcome. And then it does it again.
And again.
And again.
And the bulletin notes some staggering performance specs for this software. I mean, it doesn't just run a dozen scenarios. It runs 10,000 trials per forecast.
10,000.
It lives out 10,000 parallel universes of your corporate project, and it does it in a matter of seconds.
And it manages this while achieving a 1,000-fold data storage reduction compared to traditional methods.
Wait, how is that possible? If it's running 10,000 trials, shouldn't it be huge?
Well, it isn't storing 10,000 massive separate Excel spreadsheets on a server. It's storing the mathematical shape of the uncertainty.
Oh, okay.
This creates what statisticians call a stochastic model.
Let's clarify stochastic versus static for a moment, because those terms get thrown around. The text defines stochastic as being determined by random probability, but mechanically, how does that look different on a screen to a user?
Sure. So a static model is a spreadsheet where every cell contains a hard number. Cell A1 is 5 days. Cell B1 is $100. The total is a fixed output.
Standard Excel stuff.
Right. A stochastic model replaces those hard numbers with distributions. So cell A1 becomes, a normal distribution with a mean of 5 days and a standard deviation of 1.
Okay.
Cell B1 becomes a 20% chance of $50 and an 80% chance of $100.
So it's not a number, it's a rule.
Exactly. The model is dynamic. Every time you recalculate, the spreadsheet rolls the dice based on those defined probabilities, generating a different plausible outcome.
Wow.
Run that process 10,000 times, and the chance-o-meter aggregates all those outcomes into a single dial, showing your true probability of success.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. If this Monte Carlo method was developed in the 1940s during the Manhattan Project.
Which is wild to think about.
Right. And it's been used for decades in military operations, pricing complex financial derivatives, and deep-level engineering risk analysis. Why are businesses only just now, in 2026, trying to put this on a C-suite dashboard?
It's a fair question.
Why did it take 80 years for this math to move from Los Alamos to a standard boardroom?
That historical delay really points to the core technological barrier that Sam Savage's work is finally breaking through.
Which is what?
Historically, building a stochastic model required a massive amount of specialized expertise. You couldn't just hand this task to a mid-level marketing manager using standard office software.
Right, they'd look at you like you were crazy.
You needed a dedicated team of PhDs in operations research. You needed heavy computational power to run the simulations. It was expensive, it was slow, and the output was often highly technical.
Just a wall of math.
Yes. So the C-suite didn't use it because it wasn't accessible. A single point average on a slide was fast and easy to digest, even if it was totally wrong.
Convenience over accuracy.
Every time. But the chance-o-meter changes the paradigm entirely because it takes that incredibly complex back-end mathematics and hides it behind a simple, intuitive visual interface.
The dial.
The dial. It translates the raw processing power of Monte Carlo into the immediate language of executive decision-making.
So the technology has finally evolved to make the math invisible to the user. And once Savage built this accessible dashboard, he started plugging real historical corporate planning data into it.
And that's where things get scary.
Very scary. He started analyzing what actually happens when organizations base their operations on the flaw of averages. The results are just a harsh reality check.
The data reveals a systemic crisis, really. When organizations use traditional average-based forecasting, 80 to 90% of their projects end up running red.
90%.
Yes, meaning they are significantly over budget, significantly behind schedule, or both.
Okay, let's apply some basic logic to those numbers because that sounds insane. If a company is basing its plans on a true mathematical average, shouldn't the outcomes organically split 50-50?
You would think so.
Right. If my average commute to the office is 30 minutes, I should expect to arrive in under 30 minutes roughly half the time, and it should take longer than 30 minutes the other half of the time.
That is how a true average works, yes.
So if 90% of a company's projects are running late, they're not actually using an average at all.
No, they aren't. The fact that the failure rate is so heavily skewed proves that the standard method of forecasting is structurally biased toward optimism.
Optimism bias.
Yes. People are naturally inclined to assume the best. What goes into a corporate plan is rarely a true statistical average. It's a best-case scenario masquerading as a realistic expectation.
It is exactly like driving on a major highway across a busy metropolitan area. You look at the map and think, okay, the distance is 10 miles, the speed limit is 60 miles per hour, therefore I will be at my destination in exactly 10 minutes.
Which never happens.
Never.
Yeah.
You're building a plan based on the assumption that every single traffic light will be perfectly green the precise moment you approach it. You're assuming zero traffic congestion, no accidents blocking lanes, no construction zones, and that you won't suddenly realize you need to pull over for gas.
It's delusional.
It is a completely delusional way to plan a simple trip to the grocery store, yet we routinely use that exact same optimistic logic to plan multi-million-dollar corporate initiatives.
And that optimism bias is compounded by the mechanical nature of how tasks interact.
How so?
Think about a complex project like building a house or developing a new software platform. You chain together a series of dependent events.
Okay, so if I'm building a house and the crew framing the walls finishes 3 days early, shouldn't that speed up the entire project and give me a buffer against later delays?
You would hope so, but here's where the reality of operations bites you. The framing finishes early, but the roofers, who are the next step in the chain, are currently booked on another job across town.
Oh, right.
They can't magically drop everything and start your roof 3 days early.
They have a schedule, too.
Exactly. So the early finish hits a scheduling bottleneck. The time saved is completely lost.
Poof. Gone.
But consider the reverse. If the framing is 3 days late, the roofers are delayed. Because the roofers are delayed, the drywall team can't start. Because the drywall is late, the painters are delayed.
It's a domino effect.
In any dependent system, delays cascade and compound, but early finishes do not. They hit bottlenecks.
That is so true. I never thought about it like that.
When you plan based on averages, you ignore this asymmetrical accumulation of risk.
That perfectly explains why the delays snowball so disastrously. And this delusion is deeply embedded in corporate governance at the highest levels.
It goes all the way up.
The bulletin highlights another terrifying statistic from Savage's research. When executives sit down and set targets that they genuinely believe are sure or achievable, like the kind of targets they would confidently stake their annual bonuses and their professional reputations on.
They're sure bets.
Right. The chanceometer reveals that the actual true success rate of those sure targets is only 20%.
1 in 5.
1 in 5.
That metric alone should trigger an audit of every major corporate plan. I mean, when a CEO stands up in front of shareholders on an earnings call and says, "We are highly confident we'll hit this revenue target."
Yeah.
Mathematically speaking, they have an 80% chance of failing.
And Wall Street just eats it up.
But what the source text emphasizes is that this is not a talent problem. It's not an issue of executives being incompetent or the managers executing the projects being lazy.
Right. It's not a lack of effort.
No, it is a structural mathematics problem.
So the governance value of the chanceometer, then, is that it corrects this optimism bias at the source long before resources are committed.
Exactly.
It intervenes before the CEO makes a promise to Wall Street and before the board authorizes the capital expenditure. It forces everyone to look at the highway map with all the red lights, the traffic jams, and the construction zones fully visible.
We've established the tool, and we've faced the reality of our current bias. You know, the 80 to 90% failure rates, the 20% hit rates on sure targets.
The grim reality.
Very grim. Now we need to bring this out of the abstract and into the actual boardroom.
Yes, let's talk application.
How does probabilistic thinking, this fundamental transition from static numbers to stochastic modeling, rewire the day-to-day operational decisions of different leaders in an organization?
Let's break it down.
The bulletin breaks this down by examining specific C-suite roles. And we should really start with the money. Let's look at the chief financial officer.
Let's do it. A CFO's entire world revolves around establishing certainty where none exists.
That's their job.
Right. Traditionally, a budget meeting sounds like planting a flag in the ground. We will hit $10 million in revenue this quarter. It is a point estimate.
A hard line.
So how does a probability dial alter that dynamic in the room?
Well, the CFO looks at the chanceometer and the conversation completely changes. Instead of defending a static, painted-on number, the CFO says, well, based on our current sales pipeline, historical close rates, and market volatility, we only have a 20% chance of hitting $10 million.
I mean, just hearing that you only have a 1 in 5 chance of hitting your primary goal immediately changes the temperature of the room.
It really does. It forces the board into a structurally superior conversation.
Because they can't just yell, work harder.
Exactly. The CFO can now ask, what level of confidence do we require as an organization? If the board replies, we need a 50% confidence level to ensure we satisfy our debt covenants with the bank.
Then what?
Then the CFO uses the stochastic model to find that specific threshold. The software might reveal, to have a 50% chance of success, we need to adjust our expected target down to $8 million, or we need to significantly increase our marketing spend today to shift the probability curve of hitting the $10 million target.
That's amazing.
It moves the dialogue away from a high-pressure debate about, are you sure you can hit this?
Which just encourages bravado and hiding bad news, like we said.
Yes, to a calibrated strategic discussion about risk appetite and resource allocation.
The bulletin also dives into the CFO's role in evaluating capital projects, specifically mentioning net present value, or NPV.
This is a big one.
Let's pause on NPV for a moment. For anyone who hasn't stared at a corporate finance textbook recently, what does that actually represent in this context, and why is relying on an average NPV so dangerous?
Sure. Net present value is essentially a way to measure if a long-term investment is worth making today.
Like building a new factory.
Exactly. It's based on the time value of money, the idea that $1 today is worth more than $1 10 years from now because of inflation and potential investment returns.
Makes sense.
So when a company wants to build a new factory, they estimate all the costs over the next decade and all the expected revenue over the next decade, and they discount those future cash flows back to today's value.
Okay.
If the final NPV is a positive number, the project creates value. If it's negative, the project destroys value.
But those future cash flows and costs are completely uncertain. I mean, they're guesses. We don't know what inflation will be in 8 years.
Precisely. A traditional analysis might take average guesses for inflation, average guesses for construction costs, and average guesses for future sales.
The flaw of averages again.
Right. It spits out a single expected NPV of, say, $8.3 million. The board sees a positive $8.3 million and immediately approves the factory.
Because positive means good.
But that number is a mirage. When you run a full Monte Carlo distribution on all those variables, the chanceometer might reveal that while the average outcome is indeed $8.3 million, there's actually a 25% chance that the inflation rate spikes or construction is delayed, pushing the NPV negative.
A 25% chance of losing money.
Yes. And at the same time, there might be a 400% chance everything goes perfectly and it exceeds $12 million.
The single average number completely hid a 1 in 4 chance of destroying company value.
It swept it right under the rug.
If you're a board member authorizing a massive capital expenditure, you absolutely must know if there's a 25% chance the project will blow up in your face, regardless of what the average outcome looks like.
And if we're getting the financial projections wrong by hiding the extreme outcomes in the tails of the distribution, we are inevitably making the exact same mistakes when we actually try to build the products.
Right, the actual operations.
This brings us to operations. For a chief operating officer managing a complex global supply chain, the chanceometer is nothing short of revolutionary.
Let's look at that. Under the legacy model, a COO looks at a dashboard that says the average lead time for this critical microchip from our overseas supplier is 14 days.
Cool. Okay.
So they set their factory schedules, manage their safety stock inventory, and make delivery promises to their end customers based on a reliable 14-day cycle.
Which we know is the flaw of averages in action.
Yeah.
Because it's an average, half the time that shipment will take longer than 14 days.
Right.
When the COO runs that supply chain data through a stochastic model, the reality becomes stark.
What does it show?
The simulation might reveal that while the average is 14 days, there's actually a 30% chance of a delay stretching past 30 days.
Over a month.
Driven by factors like port congestion, weather patterns, or raw material shortages. Think about the catastrophic impact of a 30-day delay on a manufacturing assembly line.
I mean, the entire factory grinds to a halt, the labor costs continue, but no product is being built.
Exactly. If a COO can see on a dial that there is a nearly 1 in 3 chance of a massive disruption, their behavior changes entirely.
They stop relying on the 14 days.
Right. They will radically alter their safety stock levels. They might spend the extra money to dual source that critical component from a local supplier to mitigate the risk.
So they're actually managing risk.
They're no longer blindly managing to an average. They are actively managing the true risk profile of the physical world.
And you know, a 30-day delay in the supply chain doesn't just halt the factory floor. It triggers breach of contract clauses with the buyers who were promised those finished goods.
Oh, absolutely.
Suddenly, this isn't just an operations crisis. It's a massive legal liability. which leads us directly to the chief legal officer.
The CLO.
Right. Legal exposure has always felt notoriously difficult to quantify. Like, how does a CLO utilize a probability dial for something as abstract as a lawsuit?
Typically, when the CEO asks the CLO about a major contract dispute or an impending regulatory risk, the answer is heavily qualitative.
Lots of words, no numbers.
Right. A lawyer will say, our contract risk is moderate, or we expect a favorable settlement.
What does that even mean?
Exactly. Words like moderate and favorable mean entirely different things to different people. You cannot plug the word moderate into a financial model.
You definitely can't.
The chance-o-meter allows the legal department to quantify the unquantifiable.
The bulletin mentions the CLO using this to assess the probability of triggering a force majeure clause. Let's define that term. Outside of a dense legal contract, what does force majeure actually mean for the operations of the business?
Force majeure is often referred to as the act of God clause. It's a provision in a contract that relieves both parties from liability or obligation when an extraordinary event or circumstance beyond their control occurs. Things like a war, a global pandemic, or an extreme natural disaster.
Unforeseen disasters.
But it can also be tied to extreme market volatility. Instead of giving a vague narrative about moderate risk, the CLO can use stochastic modeling of historical market conditions and legal precedents to state there is a 32% probability of triggering a force majeure clause and voiding our delivery contracts if the price of oil rises above $95 a barrel.
That level of specificity is incredibly actionable.
It changes everything.
If the CFO and the CEO hear that there is a 42% chance of a massive legal event tied directly to the price of oil, they don't just sit and wait for it to happen.
No, they act.
They can go to the financial markets and buy hedging instruments to protect the company against oil hitting that exact price point. They can strategically adjust their litigation reserves. You cannot hedge against the word moderate.
No, you can't.
You can absolutely hedge against a quantified 42% probability curve.
It turns legal risk from a narrative feeling into a quantified mathematical input that the rest of the executive team can actively use to protect the enterprise.
Brilliant.
The bulletin also looks at HR and leadership, specifically regarding the redesign of executive performance targets and financial incentives.
Well, this is a critical piece because compensation ultimately drives behavior. People will do whatever the bonus structure incentivizes them to do.
Exactly. Right now, most executive bonuses are strictly tied to hitting single-point targets. And as we learned earlier, those achievable targets often only have a 20% historical probability of actually happening.
Which is so messed up.
It creates a totally toxic dynamic. You have executives either failing to hit their numbers and losing their bonuses through no fault of their own due to market realities, or, far more commonly, you have executives aggressively gaming the system.
Yeah, the sandbagging. I mean, if my entire annual bonus depends on hitting $10 million in revenue, I am going to fight tooth and nail during the annual budget planning process to make sure the official target is lowered to $8 million.
Naturally.
I will sandbag my projections to protect myself, which means the company isn't actually trying to grow as fast as it could.
But imagine redesigning those incentive targets around explicit probability thresholds generated by the chance-o-meter.
How would that work?
You align compensation with achievable risk-adjusted performance. You might establish a base bonus for hitting the 80% probability target, a number you are highly likely to reach.
Okay, the safe bet.
You offer a larger multiplier for hitting the 50% target. And you offer a massive, extraordinary payout for hitting the 10% probability target.
Because it's actually hard.
This structure becomes mathematically fair for both the executives and the shareholders, and it completely eliminates the incentive to lie or sandbag during the planning phase. Everyone is looking at the same reality.
I see how this makes the highest levels of the boardroom vastly more intelligent and aligned. But I have to push back here on behalf of the people actually doing the daily work on the ground.
Go for it.
What does this transition mean for the mid-level manager? If I'm a project manager in a standard corporate environment today, and I walk into my boss's office and say, hey boss, the software says I only have a 6% chance of finishing this project in 6 weeks, but I have a 50% chance of finishing by week 11.
Yeah.
In almost any company today, isn't my boss just going to stare at me and say, I don't want to hear about probabilities and computer dials. I want a commitment, make it happen in 6 weeks, or we will find someone who can.
Yeah, that's the classic response.
Doesn't presenting a probability curve to leadership just look like a fundamental lack of confidence?
You are absolutely right to be skeptical about the immediate reception. In a legacy company today, if you walk in with a probability curve instead of a firm promise, you probably will get yelled at for lacking commitment.
Right. It feels weak.
The bulletin doesn't pretend this is just a simple software update that everyone will seamlessly embrace. It's a brutal, necessary psychological rewiring of the entire executive suite. The cultural barrier is immense.
Huge.
But replacing false precision with a probability distribution is not a sign of weakness. It is a demonstration of superior analytical rigor.
It's requiring the boss to understand that demanding a 100% guarantee on an outcome that only has a 6% probability of happening is essentially organizational malpractice.
That's a great way to put it.
It's demanding that the manager lie to their face just to make them feel better in the moment.
Yes, and when an entire organization adopts this probabilistic mindset, the dynamic fundamentally changes. The psychological pressure to hide risks and sandbag numbers disappears. The gaming of the system stops.
Because the system is finally honest.
And most importantly, it creates shared collaborative ownership of the outcomes.
I like that.
If the boss looks at that 6% chance of a 6-week delivery, the conversation isn't a punitive demand to work harder. The conversation becomes strategic. What specific resources do we need to add to this project? How much more budget do we need to allocate to shift that curve from a 6% chance to a 50% chance?
It changes the focus from blame to problem solving.
It aligns the manager and the boss together against the uncertainty of the market, rather than pitting them against each other in a battle of false promises.
Moving from a culture of blame to a culture of calibrated risk management. I love that.
That's powerful.
This brings us to the final section of our deep dive. We have seen how the chanceometer rewires a company internally, from the CFO's budget to the COO's supply chain. Now we need to zoom out and look at how this methodology is scaling globally and why this specific shift is happening right now in 2026.
The big picture.
Because Sam Savage isn't just trying to sell a software license. He is trying to build what he terms the chance economy.
The chance economy is already taking root. The bulletin notes that heavyweights in the corporate world, like Shell, AstraZeneca, and major government agencies, are actively deploying this kind of stochastic modeling to run their massive operations.
Wow.
But what makes this widespread adoption possible today, in a way that simply wasn't feasible even 5 years ago, is the democratization of the technology through artificial intelligence.
Okay, the bulletin mentions that the chanceometer application itself was developed using AI tools with minimal traditional programming.
Yeah.
How does AI actually facilitate this? What is the mechanical role of AI in moving an organization from static averages to stochastic models?
Well, in the past, if a company wanted to build a simulation, a highly trained statistician had to manually gather years of historical data, clean it, manually identify the distribution patterns of delays or cost overruns, and then write custom code to build a simulation model.
That sounds incredibly tedious.
It took months. Today, an AI can simply ingest 5 years of unstructured data directly from a company's ERP system.
Just swallows it whole.
Exactly. The AI instantly recognizes the statistical distribution pattern of late shipments, supplier failures, or market fluctuations. It automatically generates the probability curves and builds the stochastic model in the background.
That's mind-blowing.
It replaces the team of PhDs and months of manual coding with automated, instantaneous analysis.
So you don't need a massive engineering team sitting in a room for 2 years. You don't need to secure hundreds of millions of dollars in venture capital to build a probabilistic infrastructure from scratch.
At all.
The bulletin points out that Savage built this utilizing customer equity models, completely changing the economics of deployment. What that means for any organization listening today is that the technical barrier to entry has vanished entirely. You do not need to rip out and replace your entire IT architecture.
Exactly. The stochastic engine can be embedded seamlessly into your existing enterprise software, your supply chain management systems, and your CFO's current financial dashboards.
It just plugs in.
It takes the single, static numbers your systems are already generating, processes them through the AI-driven Monte Carlo engine, and outputs probability distributions. It gives you the speedometer for uncertainty without requiring you to reinvent the wheel.
If it is becoming this easy to adopt, that implies a massive shift in how companies compete with one another.
A huge shift.
The bulletin talks about building a competitive moat. If Company A embeds the chanceometer into their operations and Company B continues to rely on average-based single-point forecasts, Company A has an overwhelming strategic advantage.
It is an entirely asymmetrical advantage.
How would you describe that difference in practice?
It's like Company B is navigating a treacherous mountain road in the middle of a dense fog, driving at full speed because they're assuming the road is perfectly straight. After all, on average, roads tend to be straight.
Which is a terrifying way to drive.
Right. But Company A has a high-definition radar system showing them every curve, every cliff edge, and every alternative route in real time. In a global market where the vast majority of competitors are still operating on the delusion of averages, an organization that treats uncertainty as a measurable, manageable variable will systematically make better capital allocation decisions.
They just have better intel.
They will assess risk more accurately. They will make commitments they can actually keep. Over time, that compounding advantage in decision quality creates an insurmountable competitive moat.
Man, I am completely sold on the corporate applications, but there is one specific detail from the bulletin that stopped me in my tracks, and I want to explore it before we wrap up.
I think I know which one you mean.
It mentions that the specific application that resonates most broadly with non-financial leaders is the personal longevity chanceometer.
Yes, the death dial.
The death dial. The software takes actuarial data, combines it with your personal lifestyle inputs, and generates a probability distribution of your remaining lifespan. It literally shows you a dial indicating the statistical probability of when you are going to die. Isn't that an incredibly morbid thing to look at on a Tuesday morning?
It absolutely sounds morbid at first glance, but the bulletin reframes it as something intensely practical and necessary.
How so?
Think about your most critical life decisions. Estate planning, succession planning for a family business, or figuring out your retirement horizon. We plan our entire lives based on an average life expectancy.
Right.
But just like a corporate software project or a supply chain, your individual lifespan is a wide distribution. Some people live to 65, some people live to 105.
And the most catastrophic risks are hiding in the tails of that distribution.
Exactly. If you build your entire retirement plan, assuming you will live to the exact average actuarial age of 82, and you happen to live out on the tail of the curve to be 95, you run out of money.
You're broke at 85.
That is a devastating tail risk.
Yeah.
The personal longevity chanceometer removes the illusion of the average and gives you the true probability curve of your life.
So you can actually plan for the extremes.
The logic scales perfectly from the deeply personal level to the macroeconomic level. Just as an individual doing estate planning needs to see the realistic distribution of their lifespan to make smart financial decisions, a CEO making a 10-year strategic plan deserves to see the full probability distribution of the business environment.
It's about replacing comfortable illusions with actionable reality, regardless of the scale.
Well said.
What a profound way to look at it. It is time to summarize what we have covered today, because we have traveled across a massive amount of conceptual ground.
We really have.
The era of the single point forecast is over. It is a mathematical dinosaur that belongs in the past. We have seen how relying on the flaw of averages hides the real existential risks in the tails of the curve.
Right.
It leads directly to systemic optimism bias, 80 to 90% project failure rates, and a C-suite culture that is structurally forced to pretend they are certain about a future that is fundamentally uncertain.
A delusion of control.
But by embracing the chanceometer, by utilizing AI-driven Monte Carlo simulations to shift from static numbers to stochastic modeling, we can finally fix the dashboard in the boardroom. We can make uncertainty a manageable, quantifiable variable. We can measure the unknown.
It represents a total paradigm shift in human planning.
It really does.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over, building directly on that personal longevity example we just discussed.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think about the biggest personal goal you have set for yourself this year. Maybe it's a financial target, a major career milestone, or a significant fitness goal.
Right.
Are you currently treating that goal like a single, rigid deadline? Are you managing your expectations to an average? What if you mapped it out as a probability distribution?
Oh, wow.
If you looked at a digital dial right now and the math revealed that you only had a 20% chance of hitting your sure personal target without fundamentally changing your approach, what would you do differently tomorrow morning?
That is the kind of question that will keep you up at night in the best possible way. The next time someone hands you a single static number to predict an uncertain future, whether it's a doctor, a mechanic, or your chief financial officer, ask them to show you the full distribution. Ask them for the X-ray of the uncertainty.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the chanceometer and the flaw of averages. Keep questioning the averages in your own life, look for the risks hiding in the tails, and we will see you next time.
Tune in next time on the Valley Current.